The biologist/thinker who is observing the data streaming into consciousness does so directly. There's no peeping outside this data stream. So the question may arise, if a person cannot see beyond their own consciousness, how can they discern the influence of their own psychology? I answer, look at the observer's perspective. Can you see how consciousness focuses? Look at what it lingers on, what it selects, what it ignores. Listen to the accompanying commentary. How your thoughts interpret and identify. What the thoughts define things as. What the thoughts prefer to define things as. Those strong feelings of identities that feel right, those habitual biases. And note, too, that the observer's perspective there only implies an observer. Stepping back into a second observer's perspective like this is arguably the most basic trait distinguishing masculine from feminine consciousness. That is, feminine-minded persons cannot maintain the double observer's perspective consistently. They use the single observer's perspective without seeing the second or the third. Now, before anyone gets angry and accuses me of glorifying men, I have criticisms to make of both males and females. Remember in the previous video where I described how masculine and feminine psychology evolved? The first point is how males are the defenders, compelled to protect women and offspring from attack. This is an important point, for if we are to understand the sexes, this protective compulsion on the part of males is a hindrance. We need freedom of thought to observe and to analyse. Preventing critique of the feminine is male chauvinism. It obstructs rationality in arguably the most important area for human consciousness to think about. The second point is a deepening of the last point I made in the previous video about the internal conflict in men. It's about the relationship between psychology and consciousness. Now, women's position as carers of offspring generally instills in them the desire to avoid aggression, to accept the system, to go with the flow, and to be more trusting and to take things at face value. My criticism is that the feminine-minded individual tends not to challenge, but to settle comfortably within the illusion of the observer's perspective. She becomes mesmerized by its cinematic appeal, surround sound and sensual messages. If she is really unhappy with the situation, she only questions the content, not the mechanisms of consciousness itself. By contrast, male psychology has never been one with society. This is reinforced at a very early age when male babies are not permitted to bond with the mother as female babies typically are. They are pushed away. At this early stage, mother is the core of his life, the core of his welfare, but he's not permitted to have it. So the male must live with two systems. He must sustain two perspectives. Thus, the adult male tends to have the second observer's perspective, or in exceptional cases of extreme masculinity, to live with a third observer, which is an intensification of the second. So the feminine consciousness is more shallow in its mental perceptions than the masculine. But before anyone gets angry about this apparently polar opposition, I'll illustrate what I mean. Genetic resiliency over the long term in sexed species relies on adaptation to the environment. In harsher environments, the sex roles have to be more masculine, meaning more unrelenting and brutal in how they manage threats to the big group's survival. For instance, babies may be instinctively at ease with being wrapped tightly in furs or be untroubled when left alone for long periods of time. Females are more masculine in such conditions, though not equally masculine as the males. But in more fertile, comfortable environments, when major predators and rival groups are controlled, the sex roles relax and both become more feminine, though still not equally so. They both tend to think less about the future, live from moment to moment, become parochial, and lead passive, vegetable-like lives. For instance, babies may be trained to entertain parents and other adults. This simple illustration shows that females can be masculine and males can be feminine, but the overall dichotomy is that masculinity predominates in males and femininity in females. I'd like to close this video with a comparison of feminine and masculine females. Here are some quotes from masculine females about feminine females. That's the method of comparison. And it shows the ability to step back into the second observer's perspective, and the ability to know the feminine as what is normal for women. We'll start with Esther Vilar. Women let men work for them, think for them, and take on their responsibilities. In fact, they exploit them. Men have been trained and conditioned by women, not unlike the way Pavlov conditioned his dogs, into becoming their slaves. As compensation for their labours, men are given periodic use of a woman's vagina. Some day it will dawn on man that woman does not read the wonderful books with which he has filled his libraries, and though she may well admire his marvellous works of art in museums, she herself will rarely create, only copy. Next, Camille Paglia. Women have been discouraged from genres such as sculpture that require studio training or expensive materials. But in philosophy, mathematics and poetry, the only materials are pen and paper. Male conspiracy cannot explain all female failures. I'm convinced that, even without restrictions, there still would have been no female Pascal, Milton or Kant. Genius is not checked by social obstacles, it will overcome. Men's egotism, so disgusting in the talentless, is the source of their greatness. Next, Celia Green. It cannot be said that the movement known as the women's liberation shows any real recognition of the conditions actually necessary for any sort of genuinely intellectual activity. What appears to be the issue is that it is recognised that the position of man has not, in the changing social situation, deteriorated as radically as that of women, and the solution envisaged appears to be to see that it does. The women concerned appear determined to demonstrate as thoroughly as possible their identification with precisely those attitudes which have always prevented women from achieving anything. And Valerie Solanas. No, women don't just adore being brood mares, despite what the mass of robot brainwashed women will say.
If you take everything that a woman holds dear away from her, if you take away the kids, the husband, her clothes, her home, everything.
Career.
Okay. Career, yes, this is right, her education, all these things away from her, what have you got? Nothing. If you do the same to a man, if you take away his career, his car, whatever, he's still a man. There's still a man there. So it comes down to, what exactly you're looking at. When you look at a woman, what is she? Now, is there something inside there, like a personality, a character, or is she just the stuff that she lives through, like the husband and the kids, and her lifestyle and career, whatever it may be? Feminism has no purpose, no goals. Like I say, it's at bottom a variation on the same theme. So what you've seen, you said you've observed that there's new faces in feminism, new colours, new designs, new patterns, new fashions. Well, there's a lot of things wrong with changing your mind every day if you actually are a person who values something.
Women display unconsciousness in the way they lack internalised persistent values and in their go-with-the-flow behaviour that is driven by emotions, sensations and anything in their environment. An atheist knows for certain that a personal, eternal God is impossible. Furthermore, an atheist does not worship any gods, including woman. Please note that none of these quotes demonstrated the third observer's perspective. The last video will explain what wise misogyny is, which, as yet, has been pointed to only tentatively.